Sin City wasn't made for you.
Hello guys, this is Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. And as for today we have a new GPU comparison, this time finally including the RTX 4060 results. I actually bought this card some time ago, but I did take my time to test it to see what it could actually do, and I was making some other videos in between, and since I'm the only one working on this channel, well, things take time to be made, okay? That's basically it. And of course, if you haven't watched, you can watch this video that I made some days ago, testing two KDC monitors that are really good in terms of price performance with their 4K 160Hz mini LED, and of course the 2K 165Hz fast IPS monitor that are very good options for their price brackets. Definitely recommend them. As for today, we're comparing the RTX 3060 versus RTX 4060 versus the RX 7600. And this because their prices are very close to each other, so which card should you get? In UAG US you have the RX 7600 at $269 plus the Starfield bundle, so you get Starfield included when actually buying the RX 7600. The RTX 4060 you have it at $289, and the RTX 3060 you have it at $284, so roughly the same price as the RTX 4060, which doesn't make much sense. As for the European prices in Mind Factory Dutchland, we have the RX 7600 at $259, €259, which is actually a very good price. We have the RTX 4060 then at €307, 46 euros above the 7600, and then we have the RTX 3060 at €275, which is 16 euros over the 7600. So while the prices are very close to each other in America, in some European countries the RX 7600 is actually way cheaper than the RTX 4060 and more or less on par with the RTX 3060. So once again, which card should you get? So let's go to the results. But before, today's sponsor is Maximum Settings, a cloud-based gaming service where you won't need to spend thousands of dollars to upgrade your PC or a personal nuclear plant to boot up your system.
Just do it!
And for as low as 9.95 Canadian dollars a month, you can play the most recent games on your computer even if your hardware isn't prepared. And if you don't play that much, well, you can just use the hourly system for as little as 0.35 Canadian dollars. Sign up today for your full Linux gaming PC with no resource sharing and start enjoying high-level gaming on any PC.
He's going to catch us! Keep running!
Plague Tale Requiem is one of those games that is known to run better on Nvidia hardware, but the RTX 3060 though is left in the dust, with the RTX 4070 being slightly slower than the RX 7600 at stock, but 7% faster when both are overclocked. This, while at the same time consuming less power. At 1440p the results do get closer, with the RTX 3060 getting some ground but still being 13% slower than the RX 7600 and 18% slower than the RTX 4060. And at 4K every single card is delivering a perfect PowerPoint presentation, not reaching even 30 average FPS. But that was quite expected. Now we have Assassin's Creed Valhalla that will soon give its place to Assassin's Creed Mirage. At 1080p, the RX 7600 is actually quite on par with the RTX 4060, with both being around 27% faster than the RTX 3060, which is quite okay actually. Moving to 1440p, we have the RX 7600 pulling a little ahead of the RTX 4060 that also loses performance with resizable bar on, being 11% faster than the RTX 3060 but 7% slower than the RX 7600. At 4K, all cards are able to achieve 40 average FPS at very high settings, which is not bad at all, with the RTX 4060 now being the fastest card. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of those games that so far runs quite well with RDNA 3 GPUs, and that's why the RX 7600 actually manages to outmatch the RTX 4060 by a little at 1080p, but once again, consuming much more power. At 1440p, the RX 7600 is still ahead of the RTX 4060, being 6% faster, while the RTX 3060 isn't even able to achieve 55 average FPS. And at 4K things don't really change that much, with the RTX 3060 being almost as fast as the RTX 4060, but we're talking about 25 average FPS, so it is kind of irrelevant, yeah. Call of Duty game engine prefers quite a lot the AMD GPUs, and that can actually be seen here, with the RX 7600 being 35% faster than the RTX 3060 and 18% faster than the RTX 4060, something that can be noticed in real gameplay. At 1440p, the RTX 4060 does gain some ground, but it is still slower than the RX 7600, with the RTX 3060 now falling below the 60 average FPS mark. And at 4K, well, the RTX 3060 performs the same as the RTX 4060, with the RX 7600 pushing almost 40 average FPS at maximum settings. Forza Horizon 5 is one of those games that favored AMD GPUs over the Nvidia ones on the previous generations, as the RX 7600 is 27% faster than the RTX 3060. I do believe that this game performs a lot better with more cache, and that's why the RTX 4060, that has way more L2 cache, is 35% faster than the RTX 3060, surpassing even the RX 7600. At 1440p, the hierarchies get maintained, with the RTX 4060 being the fastest card by a good margin, while of course consuming less power, which is also a plus, and at 4K the difference is even bigger, with even the RTX 3060 outperforming the RX 7600, and with the RTX 4060 being 34% faster and the only card being able to achieve over 60 average FPS. In Hogwarts Legacy, the RX 7600 fares pretty well actually, being 7% faster than the RTX 4060 while being much more consistent as well, since I actually had the game randomly closing several times with the RTX 4060, something that did not happen with the RX 7600. At 1440p, the RX 7600 is still the fastest card, almost achieving 60 average FPS, with the RTX 4060 actually losing performance with resizable bar enabled, getting pretty close to the performance of its predecessor. Something that somehow does not happen at 4K, where the RX 7600 is still the fastest card, but the RTX 4060 is now 13% faster than the RTX 3060.
Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra is type Cessna 152.4 miles south.
Microsoft Flight Simulator is one of the biggest surprises, well, at least for me. This game must really like cache or high frequencies, as the lower powered RTX 4060 is now 8% faster than the RX 7600 and 28% faster than the RTX 3060. At 1440p the other two cards do gain some ground, but they're still slower than the RTX 4060 while consuming more power. And of course, we have the frame generation in this game with the RTX 4060, which also is a plus for some people, not for all, but for some people definitely. Moving to 4K, well, both the more recent cards can do over 30 average FPS, which is an okay console experience for 4K with these cards of course, and you can always use upscalers at this resolution as they'll work pretty decently. Overall, good results. And our first Vulkan title is Rainbow Six Extraction. In this case, the RX 7600 is the fastest card, with the RTX 4060 once again losing performance when using resizable bar, while the RTX 3060 actually benefits a lot. At 1440p, the RX 7600 loses its spot to the RTX 4060, something that does not happen at 4K, where the RTX 3060 is only 2 FPS behind the RX 7600, with the RTX 4060 almost achieving 60 average FPS. Red Dead Redemption 2 is our second Vulkan title, and once again the RTX 4060 loses a lot of performance when enabling resizable bar. It gets higher minimums, but much lower averages, going from being on par with the RX 7600 to being considerably slower, indicating once again some issues on the NVIDIA drivers. At 1440p though, the difference goes away and the RTX 4060 is now outperforming the RX 7600 by 4% and the RTX 3060 by 18%. At 4K, the RTX 3060 almost matches the RX 7600, with the RTX 4060 being a bit faster, pushing over the 40 average FPS mark, thus while consuming less power. Guardians of the Galaxy is a title that is known to perform quite better on the NVIDIA cards, and in here, even the RTX 3060 outperforms the RX 7600 by 15%, while the RTX 4060 is a whopping 33% faster. At 1440p there are still differences of course, with the RTX 4060 being much faster while consuming less power than the other two cards, and at 4K, well, the RX 7600 is finally able to do more or less the same FPS as the RTX 3060, while still being quite slower than the RTX 4060. In the recent patches from The Last of Us and recent driver updates from AMD, the AMD higher tier cards from the 6000 and 7000 series got a massive performance increase when using Smart Access memory. Sadly, lower tier cards like the RX 7600 didn't benefit from that boost, being 10% faster than the RTX 3060 but slower than the RTX 4060. As we go into 1440p, things do remain the same, with none of the cards delivering 60 average FPS, and with the RTX 4060 once again losing a bit of performance when using resizable bar. And at 4K, all the cards are more or less on par with each other, with the RX 7600 actually being the slowest card now. Interesting. God of War is a game that loves AMD GPUs, because well, it was made for them, like The Last of Us, but that game is still quite broken. At 1080p we have the RX 7600 outperforming the RTX 4060 by 10%, while the same is still losing performance when enabling resizable bar, something that god knows why gets reversed at 1440p, where resizable bar slightly increases its performance, making it actually on par with the RX 7600. And at 1440p ultra-wide, it finally outmatches the RX 7600, being now the fastest card, with also once again the lowest power draw. As for the average as well, we do have the RX 7600 and the RTX 4060 being basically on par at 1080p, being just 0.9 FPS apart, and at higher resolutions the RTX 4060 does take the lead over the RX 7600, with both these cards being considerably faster than the RTX 3060 at 1080p and 1440p. Overall, great results for the newer GPUs. Let's get into ray tracing.
But lost hope. We're not from here either. Stellantis locked us up here a year ago.
Our first ray tracing game, like always, is Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition. In here we can see the massive uplift that the RTX 4060 had versus its predecessor, because even with less ray tracing units, at 1080p it is 27% faster than the RTX 3060 and 38% faster than the RX 7600. At 1440p the difference is also big because, while the other two cards struggle to get the 50 average FPS mark, well, the RTX 4060 is delivering a solid 60 in that department. And I mean, even at 4K this card is able to get close to 30 average FPS, which is actually pretty good for a full ray tracing game at maximum settings. Going to Cyberpunk 2077, where the CUDA cores actually help the ray tracing performance, at least from what I've heard, even the RTX 3060 is 45% faster than the RX 7600, while the RTX 4060 completely annihilates it with a 70% advantage. I mean, it has almost as many FPS without DLSS as the RX 7600 has with FSR. That's crazy. At 1440p, things get even worse for the RX 7600 that delivers 10 FPS, while its NVIDIA counterpart delivers 283, being 137% faster, so more than double the performance, with the upscaling performance being much superior on the RTX 4060 as well, even with it being really close to the RTX 3060 here, which is a bummer. As we go into Resident Evil 4, things aren't that bad for the Red Team, where the RX 7600 is slower than the RTX 4060, but still delivers a good performance with ray tracing, still being 10% faster than the RTX 3060. At 1440p the RX 7600 actually gets some more ground and now matches the RTX 4060 in rasterization, while still being faster than the RTX 3060 in ray tracing. And at 1440p ultra-wide it maintains its lead in rasterization of course, but now is even slower than the RTX 3060 when using ray tracing. Interesting and still pretty decent results for all the cards here. And in Spider-Man Remastered, we have the RTX 4060 once again being considerably faster than the RX 7600 in ray tracing, but surprisingly barely matching the older RTX 3060. And that's because this game heavily relies on bandwidth, hence the RX 6700 being much faster than the RX 7600 in this game, even when being more or less on par in all others. At 1440p the RTX 4060 is finally slightly faster than the RTX 3060 in ray tracing and considerably faster in rasterization, while of course being much faster than the RX 7600. And at 4K the ray tracing performance difference gets even bigger, with the RTX 4060 being 68% faster than the RX 7600, which is insane, even when being only 15% faster in rasterization. In terms of upscaling performance, we're only testing performance and not image quality. I will though try to include some DLSS3 frame generation benchmarks here as soon as I get to retest some cards, but for now, this is it. In God of War we have an impressive FPS stability with both the RX 7600 and RTX 4060 delivering the same FPS numbers with or without upscaling techniques. At 1440p ultra-wide things change a bit, with the DLSS now performing quite better than the FSR on the Nvidia cards of course, while making the RTX 4060 9% faster instead of the 4% faster when running at native resolution. Interesting. And the last game is once again Spider-Man Remastered, now testing Intel's XeSS as well. I do believe there's something very wrong with the RTX 4060's performance in this game, as the longer you stay inside the game or the more you change the settings, the worse the card performs, which is something that I've experienced before only with the RX 6650 XT. But well, The RTX 4060 is clearly faster with DLSS, delivering a much better performance than FSR, and XeSS actually delivers worse performance than native, with the RTX 3060 having very consistent results across the board due to a bigger bus width, I suppose. At 4K, things get a little more stable for the RTX 4060, with XeSS finally getting more performance than native, but with the DLSS being the clear winner, while the RTX 3060 performs pretty much the same with the DLSS or FSR. The RTX 3060 also catches up with the RX 7600 at this resolution, and both are much closer to the RTX 4060 than before. All said and done, well, let's move to the conclusion. And well, you guys actually saw the results, and you saw that in terms of rasterization at 1080p, which is where these cards are meant to be, the RTX 4060 and the RX 7600 are more or less on par with each other, which is completely okay. As for the resolution, as the resolution goes up, at 1440p, let's say that the RTX 4060 is slightly faster than the RX 7600, and both are considerably faster than the RTX 3060 12GB. Now, there are some advantages and some disadvantages of all the cards. As for the RTX 3060, if you're getting an RTX 3060, you don't get one new, because it isn't worth it. If you want to go for the RTX 3060 or for older generation cards, you go for the used market, because they are way more worth it than getting a new card. For example, you can get a used RTX 3060, let's say for like 200 euros or even less than that. So if you want the RTX 3060, my advice is to get one used. As for the RX 7600 versus RTX 4060 debate, I sincerely cannot see any reason for you to get the RX 7600 over the RTX 4060. Unless you're European and you can indeed get a difference of, let's say, 50 euros in between these two cards, and well, you are on a really tight budget, and with those 50 euros you can get, let's say, for example, an NVMe, or you can get better RAM or so on. Because even though the RTX 4060 is indeed more expensive, sometimes less, sometimes more, sometimes less, well, it also consumes less power than the RX 7600. I do not know if the Nvidia cards actually show the full board power, because the previous AMD cards didn't show. These new ones, like the RX 7600, show the full board power. So that's the power draw of the whole card and not just the GPU, the graphics processing unit. I don't know if it's the same with Nvidia, but let's say it is the same. Even then, the RTX 4060 would be consuming, let's say, 150 watts, which is 50 watts less than the RX 7600 when both are overclocked. And on top of that, we even have more features like DLSS that is considerably better looking than FSR, mostly at lower resolutions, which is the resolutions that these cards are aimed for. So if you're going to play, let's say, at 1440p when using DLSS versus FSR, DLSS will look considerably better. At higher resolutions like 4K, well, DLSS and FSR do look almost the same. But at lower resolutions, let's say upscaling from lower than 1080p, DLSS does look much better. And on top of that, once again, you have the DLSS3 frame generation, which well, on the RTX 4060 in most games it does not work that well. The frames that it has aren't that many, and well, you have some issues, some stuttering issues here and there, and of course it's not perfect, it's not even close to perfect, so you do have some movement artifacts that sometimes feel like, let's say, they feel like screen tearing, but they aren't screen tearing because you're still inside the FreeSync range, so they are indeed movement artifacts from using the DLSS frame generation. But in most games it is perfectly usable, and it's something that you have over the AMD card that you don't. So once again, apart from the really budget scenarios and most European countries, I see no absolute reason to get the RX 7600 over the RTX 4060. So at the same price, or at close to the same price, let's say in between $30 or 30 euros difference, definitely get the 4060. Less power draw once again, the DLSS is better than FSR overall, and you have for now the DLSS3 frame generation. That does not happen on the AMD side because they still didn't release the FSR3. It is what it is, I guess. And yeah guys, that's all for today's video. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video, as it really helps very much. And yeah, basically see you in the next one. There's not really much more to say. Yeah, cheers guys, thank you. Oh, don't forget, leave your comment in the comment section and let me know what you think about these cards. Which one would you get and why? I really want to know. Ciao.